How much Bitcoin do you need to retire? This is a question everybody is talking about, and that is because there is a retirement crisis today. Everywhere around the world, we can see that people are falling behind in their ability to retire with dollars because the cost of living continues to increase. So today I want to take a look at the 9 charts that expose how much Bitcoin you need to retire. We're going to be having a look at the top 100 Bitcoin rich lists, and we're going to be doing all of that after we listen to Bitcoin billionaire Michael Saylor talking about the importance of 0.1 Bitcoin and 0.01 Bitcoin. That's right, fractions of a Bitcoin. So let's play that video for you guys now.
Buying a Bitcoin, whether it's 1 Bitcoin or a million Satoshis or 100,000 Satoshis or 1 Satoshi, is just like buying into New York City 250 years ago.
Why is buying 1 Bitcoin or 0.1 Bitcoin like buying into real estate in New York City 250 years ago? This is because Bitcoin is very rare and it's very scarce. So this is why the whole idea of retiring on Bitcoin is very interesting and very different as opposed to trying to retire with dollars. Everybody knows that trying to retire with dollars is like running on a hamster wheel, because we're going to be having a look today at how this hamster wheel continues to change. We're going to be looking at how the amounts that you have needed to retire has continually changed. We can see in 1951, you were told that you could retire with $27,000. What does $27,000 buy you today? A ham sandwich? It doesn't buy you much. It buys you a little bit more than a ham sandwich, but you could probably only get a Toyota Corolla. You probably couldn't even get a new one. And this really highlights the crisis that we're living in today. We are living in a retirement. And that's because the money we're told to store our savings in is rapidly losing its purchasing power. It has an infinite supply because there are people who can print money for free. So we can see here, 1 in 3 Americans have $0 saved for retirement today. And even those who have saved a little bit of money for retirement, have a look at the percentages here. 23% of Americans have less than $10,000 for retirement. What's $10,000 going to buy you in 20 years? Serious question. Not much. Certainly not going to be enough to retire on. This is why we're living in this world that's sadly trending in this direction. Americans are retiring later than usual and expecting to work longer than in past decades. Why? Why is that true? Well, it's because people can print money out of thin air. This is why. And today I want to kind of have a look at, okay, there's a problem. It's becoming increasingly difficult to retire. As you can see, it's becoming increasingly difficult to achieve not just an American dream, but really excel and reach the top 1%. We can see in many of these places around the world, you need an incredible amount of dollars to get in the top 1%. In Monaco, $12 million. Luxembourg, $11 million. Switzerland, $8 million. The US, where a ton of you guys are living, $5.8 million. Australia, $4.7 million. We're needing an exponentially rising amount of capital to be in that top 1%. We can also see it broken down by age brackets. I know a lot of you guys watching the channel are, in your 30s or 40s. Welcome. And you can see how much money you need. If you're between 35 and 39, you need nearly $5 million to be considered the top 1%. When we look at it from an income perspective, You guys can see if you're 30 years old, you need to be making $200,000 a year to be considered top 1%. If you're 40 years old, you need to have a net worth of $3 million and be making $320,000 to be in the top 1%. The idea of getting into the top 1% is really running away from people, especially as more and more money is printed. But let's have a look at how much you need to be in the top 1% for Bitcoin. And the top 1% of holders in Bitcoin. All of a sudden, it's very different. We can see to be in the top 1%, this is the green section of this little wealth pyramid, Bitcoin wealth pyramid. You can see you only need $109,000 to be a part of that top 1%. We can also see if we take a look over here, let's have a look at the Bitcoin wealth distribution. We can see there's really not a lot of Bitcoin out there because a lot of the whales do hold a lot of Bitcoin. And it's worth noting that this is exchanges. This isn't just wealthy individuals. But when we jump on over here to the Bitcoin rich list, this is what I really like because this kind of shows you how many people own more than one Bitcoin. So this little column here, I would love to highlight it, but I can't. Oh yeah, I can. Have a look at that. All right. All right. We can see there are about 1 million wallets that hold between 0.1 and 1 Bitcoin. Think about how little people that is. It's not many people. 0.001% of the world. It's tiny. 1 million people out of 8 billion. Really kind of shows how rare and how scarce Bitcoin is and how achievable it can be to get into the top 1%. Because again, this is the question. This is the hedge. This is the opportunity that Bitcoin affords us. If Bitcoin does become the next money of the world, imagine holding 1 Bitcoin. By definition, there's going to be less than 20 million people in the entire world who can do that, who can hold 1 Bitcoin, by definition. Even investing $100,000 into Bitcoin today puts you in the top 1% today. Imagine holding that for 50 years. Imagine holding that when the other 99% of the world who haven't bought Bitcoin today realize, hang on a minute, I need to buy some Bitcoin and own some Bitcoin. This is the biggest thing people don't understand. Bitcoin's gone from $0 to $100,000 a coin with only 1% of the world buying Bitcoin. That's it. Bitcoin's adopted by less than 1% of the world. What's the price going to do when the other 99% of the world realizes they have to buy some Bitcoin? A hamburger could cost $1 million in the future. That is true. And that is because inflation is right now absolutely out of control. I'm going to show you guys my favorite chart. This is also related to why there is a retirement crisis. It's because we're living in an era of a money printing bonanza. We're living in an era where, as you can see, for the first time in 400 years, we've seen inflation take off like an absolute rocket ship. Look at how that chart was relatively stable for 250 years between the 1770s and the early 1900s. That chart actually is even more stable going back to the left of that chart. And then all of a sudden we give central bankers the ability to print money out of thin air and have a look what happens. Cost of living crisis. And naturally, when you can just print money untethered from reality, guess what that does to wealth distribution? Guess what that does to the disparity between the top 1% and the bottom 90%? I'm going to take a drink, but I'm going to let you guys have a look at that chart for yourself and come to your own conclusions. What are we looking at here? Okay, since 1970, that blue line has gone sideways, and if not gone sideways, it's gone down. That's showing you the bottom 90%, you and me, our share of global wealth is going down since 1970, since governments have been able to print money out of thin air and blow up these massive asset bubbles, these massive property bubbles, which they are invested into. What about the red line? What about the orange line? The orange line is the top 1% of earners, and have a look at their wealth skyrocket after 1970. Buck 52,000 in the chat pretty much nails it. QE's come in. Rich people love inflation. It inflates the price of their assets. Absolutely. This is 100% what this chart is showing us. It is showing us that the rich are incredibly benefited from this fiat system. I encourage you guys just to scroll this website. WTF happened in 1971 has some of the best charts I've seen, looking at things from a macro perspective. We can see wealth inequality. It's as wide as it was in the 1930s, the last time we lived through the unwinding of the 90-year long-term debt cycle and the 90-year fourth turning cycle. Again, every 90 years, the world reaches these really unstable levels of wealth inequality, and all of a sudden we see really crazy things happen in the world. People say, yeah, you know what? Enough is enough. This is BS. I know that the rich are stealing my wealth. I'm going to create a revolution every 90 years. In the 1930s, we had the Great Depression. We had the election of FDR in America. It was a socialist revolution. We had the election of Mussolini in Italy. Hitler in Germany. Every 90 years, the people say enough is enough. We need a dramatic change. We need a drastic change. 90 years before then, 1860s, Civil War in America. 90 years before then, in the 1770s, American and French revolutions. Two of the biggest revolutions in history. Happens every 90 years. Right now, if you go 90 years forward from 1930, where are we? 2020. This is why the world feels so crazy, and it is because this chart right here, wealth inequality is as extreme as it was in the 1930s. What this is measuring, I'm going to try to zoom it up, make it as big as possible so you guys can see what I've got here. We can see the bottom 90%, the red line. That's the red. You can see it's been trending down since 1980. Again, what happened in 1980? We can see the green line. It's been trending up. This is the top 0.1%. This is the uber wealthy. The top 0.1% are about to own more of the world's wealth than the bottom 90% of people combined. Does that make sense? Again, there will always be wealth inequality. Wealth inequality is not a bad thing. We're always going to have people who are smarter and work harder and create incredible businesses that should be rewarded and should have more money than me, an everyday Joe. Okay, this is a good thing. This is how capitalism works. But there are tipping points to this game, okay? And historically, when the top 0.1% own more than the bottom 90% combined, the people feel that maybe, just maybe, something is going wrong. Just trying to catch up on some comments here in the chat. There's 880 of you guys tuning in live. Welcome to everyone tuning in on this beautiful sunny Wednesday afternoon. Couldn't agree more with Eagly's comment in the chat. Everybody is talking about XRP right now because of it being included in Trump's Truth Social post about this crypto strategic reserve. Couldn't agree more. XRP is just a scam. Simple. Let's go through a few more of these charts I've got for you guys. This is one of the ones that really concerns me. And this is one of the ones for why it is impossible to retire in fiat and in dollars. The money supply is going absolutely exponential. It's really as simple as that. Let's dive into looking at this little pie chart here. I'm going to make myself small. That's hard to do when you got a head like me. And have a look at that. I'm really interested in this, let's call it the blue sliver. These are the guys who own between 0.1 Bitcoin and 1 Bitcoin. 7%. 7%. Not many. Not many at all. And then have a look at the big green sliver. So these are the guys who own between 1 million Satoshis and 10 million Satoshis. This is between 1% of a Bitcoin. That's how much Bitcoin you can win if you go into the wishing well over here at the Bitcoin well. 1% of a Bitcoin, it's not chump change. It's about $1,000 today. So again, reminder, go check out what the Bitcoin well is doing. You might even be able to get a little bit of generational wealth for free. And then also make sure, another reminder, you go check out what Stampseed is doing. Once you got your hands on that generational wealth, go and back it up correctly, the way you should be backing it up. But again, what percentage of the Bitcoin network owns 1% of a Bitcoin? We can see the green sliver here. 16% of the network. So I know some people say, oh, I can't own a Bitcoin. It's too hard to own a Bitcoin. I can see that argument. It could take many years now to save to get up to 1 Bitcoin. But you can certainly buy 10% of a Bitcoin. Look, I've made many videos in the past saying that 0.1 Bitcoin could be generational wealth. I think that could be a lot of money, could be incredibly valuable in the future. Today, it's about $10,000. I genuinely believe this is where things are going to get a little bit crazy and some people are going to be dropping off the stream. But I genuinely believe, my very conservative heart of hearts, 1 Bitcoin will be worth $100 million in the future. Very conservatively. Here we go. I'll wait for the hate comments to flow in here. I do genuinely believe that. And if I actually told you what I believed, you wouldn't believe me. I actually think the price of Bitcoin is going so much higher than that in today's purchasing power. And it's purely because Bitcoin's incredibly rare. It's incredibly scarce. Again, do the maths, do the numbers. There's only 2.5 million Bitcoin on exchanges, and that number is rapidly shrinking. There's 50 million millionaires. There's 3,000 billionaires. One billionaire alone owns 500,000 coins. There's only enough Bitcoin on exchanges for another 5 billionaires to own more Bitcoin than Michael Saylor. Bitcoin's rarer than we think. Bitcoin's scarcer than we think. And I think the world is going to be absolutely FOMOing into Bitcoin in the not too distant future. And it's going to accelerate a lot quicker than most of us think. In our lifetimes, yes, Kangoo, I do believe we're going to be seeing $100 million Bitcoin in our lifetimes. If you do want to learn more about that topic, and if you do want to learn a little bit more about the specifics and the maths of how much Bitcoin you do need to retire, and just how quickly I think it could happen, I might link you guys to another video I filmed on that topic. I'm going to put a link to that video somewhere around there. And with that said, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in.